Hey, Amanda, welcome to the show.
Hi, Brittany. Thanks so much for having me today.
Definitely. Is that a chandelier behind you?
This is a chandelier behind me. Yes.
That's like
We
real
have
fancy.
beautiful lighting in the place we're renting. I can't take any credit for it, but I certainly enjoy it.
That's awesome. And where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from Salt Lake City.
Salt Lake City. Awesome.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
I just love learning about where people are calling in from. I mean, we got different continents, different countries, different
Mhm.
cities. So it's always really cool to hear where Femtech is happening. And I'm actually really grateful for the pandemic making everything virtual because Femtech doesn't have a hub. We're
Right.
everywhere, right?
It's literally all over the world.
Yeah.
So
Have you
relevant
noticed that
everywhere.
too? Like, I actually feel more connected to Femtech because now we all just accept it's going to be on Zoom. Do you feel like that too?
I do. I feel like, there's such an interesting femtech community and set of events in Europe that in years past, it would be like, oh, I can't fly to London. I wish I could attend, but now you can just, Zoom in at random hours. The only thing you have to worry about is the different time zones. So I have found that to be really cool, connecting more with the Women of Wearables community and different global femtech networks just to bring it all together.
You are so right. I was supposed to actually go to Japan and visit Fermata,
Mm.
Femtech group out there in March of last year. It was right on the edge. Trip got canceled, but it was like, oh, I want to get to know you and get connected. I have to fly to Japan.
Right.
That's what I'm gonna have to
Which
do.
would be really cool anyways, but I think I think that's been one of the silver linings is just realizing you don't have to do that.
Yep. But now I can virtually know them. And now when I go to Japan, we can just party, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we don't have to
Exactly.
we can just bypass all of the introductions.
For
Well,
sure.
anyways, let's get into your story. So one of the things we always love to cover is our guests' backgrounds. We usually don't get a degree in femtech, right? We usually study something else. A lot of times people have a personal experience that got them here. So tell us what your story is. What did you study? Did you have a career? How did you end up here?
Yeah, certainly. So I would say, from the beginning, my career and my story has really been rooted in my passion for both arts and math. So I grew up a total nerd. I love math, still do. I was always looking for harder math problems and just problems to solve. And at the same time, my mom is a ballet teacher. I loved dance and theater. And I think because of that, I wasn't always sure what I wanted to be when I grew up at first. There's not necessarily that example for the ballerina mathematician, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's not the stereotype. There actually are a lot of us, but it's not the stereotype. And so I remember growing up thinking like, oh, do I want to be a doctor? I think that could be a really cool way to just help people and make the world a better place. At the same time, I'm so empathetic and I really connect with like the dreams and pains of strangers. And so I just thought, okay, I think this is going to be too challenging to be a physician. I think I would get too emotionally wrapped up in this. Not to mention, as I asked around, I learned you actually don't do a lot of math as a doctor necessarily, not in most fields, right? And so that kind of brought me back to the drawing board thinking, okay, what would be a way that I could do math and science while creating things, while building things, while helping make the world a better place. And I was fortunate to be kind of clued into the field of mechanical engineering when I was in high school. People started telling me, that could be a really cool industry for you because mechanical engineers build products, they invent new things, they bring it to market. And so that was how I ended up studying mechanical engineering. And really with that angle of wanting to develop products in the medical device industry. Mm-hmm. So my first job after graduating from Duke was a job at Edwards Lifesciences, which is a global company. They primarily develop cardiovascular products and heart valves. I did a rotational program with them, which was so cool because I got to have roles in R&D, marketing, project management, and I just loved, driving innovations forward. After a couple of years at Edwards, I moved to Earlens, which is a hearing aid startup. And again, the theme was similar. It was like driving global technology forward as an engineer. And I loved that translation from concept all the way to patients.
And I'm sure at a startup, you were wearing all the hats, right?
Right. Yes. Wearing all the hats.
We do everything, right? Yeah.
Actually, this is an embarrassing fact, but when I was at Earlens, we were developing a really novel hearing aid. And when I joined the company, I was really gung-ho. I just wanted to help, whoever I could, which is one of my tips, I would say, for people, especially early in their careers, to just kind of jump in and try different things. And so the marketing department kind of saw that opportunity and they said, okay, great. We need someone to be the patient in our patient video. Could you model for us? And I was like, sure, that sounds glamorous. And in the end, it was a video of the physician at the company literally removing earwax from my ear to clean it, to place the hearing aid. And this is the demo video that they now show to physicians all over the country. So that's the extent of my modeling career, unfortunately.
I love that story.
Earwax removal services.
Classic startup. So I used to have a DNA-based dating app, and how you would do your DNA test for the dating app is you'd swab your cheek. And so there was hundreds of videos of me swabbing my cheek to like illustrate it. And there was at one point, if you Googled my name, like the first 2 rows were just me at different angles swabbing the side of my mouth.
You had amazing SEO for this early step of your career.
I Googled myself and it's decreased. They're still in there, but there are like other things now too. So I love that story. So what happened to the hearing aid company? What happened next?
Yeah, so after that, we launched the product. It's been really successful. It just recently won one of Time's Best Inventions. And so it was exciting to see that, just the scale of success that it's achieved. But once we got through the launch, I really felt like, okay, I love this process of bringing products to market. I really want to learn how to do that myself. And so that brought me to the Stanford Biodesign program, which is the Innovation Fellowship that I did just prior to founding Emmy. And it's a really cool global program. They bring together physicians and engineers. They choose 12 fellows every year to really learn this process, which is a very process-driven approach to solving unmet needs. And it was really cool. We had full access to Stanford Hospital. We were tasked with just finding as many problems and challenges as we could. And then through design thinking and through the biodesign process, we were really trained through this approach of how do you identify which of those are the most promising business opportunities. And that was really where Emmy was born, because I came to that program with such a background in driving innovative medical devices to market. And I had really cool opportunities to observe in different categories of women's health, labor and delivery, prenatal, well woman clinic. And I was just looking around like, where's the innovation? Where are the products? People are suffering left and right. Like it's not that it's not possible. I know it's possible because I've done this in multiple sectors of healthcare. And I couldn't believe that. And then I kind of coupled that with just reflecting on, well, I really have always been the only female engineer in the room on my team. Perhaps that lack of balanced perspective is contributing to the fact that there has not been as much innovation in the category, just because you don't have as many people who really understand the needs. And so it was almost overwhelming at first because there are just so many unmet needs in women's health. But I just had so many conversations, endless.
I'm like, I made a business out of it.
You made a business out of it. I mean, it's such a big business opportunity. And what I noticed was there are a lot of companies, fortunately and thankfully, supporting, prenatal care, postpartum, fertility. There weren't as many companies, and still really aren't, focusing on contraception. Like, what about that first moment when you decide you don't want to get pregnant and you need support, and maybe you're not going to want to tell your parents? And we looked at the pill and we just saw like, wow, the pill has not been innovated on since it launched in the 60s. That would be okay if the pill worked well for people, but in reality, nearly 1 out of 10 people on the pill have an unplanned pregnancy each year, which amounts to 1 million unplanned pregnancies, which is so staggering. It's all because of adherence challenges. So people missing 1 to 2 pills a month, which most of us do, myself included. And there's this obvious problem that no one was doing anything about, and I would start to ask around, and it's like, oh, well, that's just a part of life, part of the pill, the risk we take, get used to it. And I was like, there is no way. I can't think of any other product where, I mean, even a 2% failure rate, let alone 9, would be deemed acceptable. But I think that's kind of the challenge with women's health is, that narrative is pretty common. Oh, this is good enough. This is how it is. I've had people tell me like, oh, well, if women didn't want to get pregnant, they would just be better at taking the pill, which I find staggering. Because nobody's perfect. We struggle with routines in every category of life. And so it would be rare to blame the user, right? When a system's not better, like people, think of any innovation, it's improving life. And yet for the pill, that just hadn't been the attitude. And so it has been really exciting to found Emmy to really change that attitude, change that narrative, and finally bring a product to market that solves such a big problem.
Well, I have a lot to say. I anticipate you're probably going to talk about a bunch of points, so I won't get into it just yet.
No, I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Well, let's start with, what does Emmy do? And then I'm going to bring up some points I'd love to discuss with you. So what is Emmy? How is Emmy solving this problem?
Yeah, so we recently commercialized the first smart pill case for birth control pill adherence. It is a small, sleek, beautiful, connected pill case. So it's a Bluetooth-enabled case. It has multiple sensors. It syncs automatically with your phone. And I almost describe it as like a Fitbit for the pill, because it tracks if, where, and when you've taken your pill, syncs that data automatically with our app. Mm-hmm. And then the magic really is in the experience with the app, because for people who use our product, because we have data about how they're using their medication, our app is able to send smart, relevant reminders until people actually take the pill. So alarm fatigue is such a common problem. You think you're going to remember, you just keep snoozing it. It always comes at the wrong time.
Girl, you should see my alarm.
I can imagine, like, birth control 1, birth control 2. Well, the problem with that is your phone has no idea if you've taken your pill or not. And so it's just going to keep bugging you, and you're going to keep ignoring it. With the Emmy system, we send reminders only when you've missed your pill. So it's really relevant. So when you get that reminder, which you can customize, it can be a text, it can be push notification, you can get up to 3 reminders. It's just a much more personalized experience. And this reduces missed pills by 80%. That's something that we've shown in one of our recent studies. And so it not only helps people be better at taking the pill on time, but our app, what I found was there was really a gap in information too. Like, what are you supposed to do if you miss a pill? Are you on the right pill for your body? How do you make sure that this medication, which is so common, is really, doing its job for you? And so our app also provides details from, Center for Disease Control. If you miss a pill, what should you do? Mm-hmm. It enables you to track symptoms and side effects so you can get that full picture, and just really closes the loop on the pill experience as that first touch point towards the broader vision of driving innovation for the entire women's health journey.
I'm writing down some questions because I don't want to forget all of them that are shooting through my brain right now. So number 1, what are you supposed to do if you miss the pill?
There's a couple of things. The instructions are somewhat complex. So there are 2 types of birth control pills. Broadly speaking, there's progestin only, which doesn't have estrogen, and then there are combination pills, which have progestin and estrogen. So even between those 2 things, what you should do if you miss a pill is different. Okay. Broadly speaking, if you're on progestin only, you have a very narrow window, only a couple of hours before you're at risk of unplanned pregnancy, at which point, if you're even just a few hours late with your pill, for most of these prescriptions, you should use a backup for several days. It's different for combination. The combination pills are slightly less sensitive, so you have a wider window in which you can take the pill. You generally can take the pill within 24 hours, but then if you do miss, you need to use backup contraception for 7 days. And those are just kind of the general themes. It also depends on which week you are in your cycle. Certain weeks you would be instructed to just stop what you're doing and start a new pack. And this is why Google searching like missed pill, what do I do, doesn't work because you heard, what I just described. It depends on what type of prescription, how many hours late you were, what number pill you were on. And if you Google search, I've heard from so many people who are like, I Google searched and I was just convinced I was pregnant, like for no reason, because it has no idea your context. And so for us, that's a big part of it is with the pill data, we can actually identify, okay, which piece of information do we surface that could be the most relevant to hopefully make that whole experience much less stressful.
And there is enough data for, if Google was actually like women centered and empowered, is there enough research on like which pill, and if you miss it and how much time, like what's your risk? Because a lot of times we interact with Femtech founders that are like, yeah, we know like if you miss your pill, like you're going to, this could happen. But technically, if you ask me for the graph, like no one's actually researched it. So is that the case here? Or
unfortunately, yes, that is the case here. There is not yet research that suggests, if you take this specific action on this day, your chances decrease by this %. And when you look at just research for birth control pills in general, there are a very limited number of studies. Even the study that I point to about pill adherence and the challenges around missed pills, the most prominent study is from 1998, which is wild, right? And so I think the fact that there has not been research means it's very important for women and people on the pill to take matters into their own hands, which is why we support so much symptom tracking. We want to hear from people. Did this work for you or not? What are your symptoms and side effects? So that together with our community, we can actually pioneer and build that data set and build that research set to start to answer some of those questions. Because unfortunately, pharmaceutical companies aren't necessarily motivated to run studies that will tell you that their prescription is not as effective as the other. I can't blame them, but I think that's why the mission of our company and the mantra is putting women's health in women's hands. Right. When I looked at what else was going on, I was like, I can't find another option than to just take matters into our own hands, build our own data, and start to publish some information about this, because it's unfortunate. And what you're saying is true. It's not just Emmy, it's not just the pill, it's not just birth control. Unfortunately, across so many sectors of women's health, there are certain conditions where medications have only been tested on men, even though our hormones are incredibly different. And those conclusions were drawn really without looking at the right patient population. So it's highly problematic. And I think and hope that this can only improve over time.
Absolutely. 110%. One of the scariest, I have so many crazy facts. I'm a great guest. Invite me over for dinner. Lots of fun facts. Interesting facts. One of them is we have so many C-sections because we think that women are stalling out in their labor. But if we look at what the research was for like cervical dilation, it was done on like 20 white women in the 70s, and they were actually sedated. And it's like, what? We're literally cutting women open because of a study we did decades ago, and there was only white women, and they were all 22, and they were, it's like
none in
this,
natural, common, scenarios for childbirth. Yeah, I mean, it's noted and just staggering that the C-section rate is so much higher in the United States compared to so many other countries, and it's cultural, and it's also, I think, rooted, as you said, and there's such a knowledge gap.
Yeah, I mean,
these studies are like only white women, small sample sizes. Yeah. It's just completely inappropriate for the patient population today.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So, all right. And I also want to hit home a point that you said earlier, which is this, birth control study is in 1998, right? Yet, what is the percentage of women, or how many women in the US are on birth control? Just so we can really sit these next to each other.
Yeah, so there are 10 million women in the US at any given time on birth control pills, 150 million women worldwide. And those numbers in the US, it represents the fact that the pill is the most common form of contraception. And so, let alone one of the most commonly prescribed drugs, separate from just being contraception.
That'd be like top 10, right? Prescribed drugs or something.
It's one of the most common prescriptions, especially for, teenage girls, women in their 20s. It's often that first prescription. And that was what made me so sad, was to see for millions, tens of millions of women, this is the entry point into the healthcare system. And it's so disappointing. It's so stressful. It leads to people buying pregnancy tests, taking Plan B more often than they would like to. And so, and yes, yet it's considered somewhat niche. Women's health is often described as this niche category, which I won't go into because I know it's talked about a lot, but it's just like, the numbers don't compute for that type of conclusion. And so I think that's why, fortunately, more women's health companies are popping up, is there just is really so much unmet need.
That's right. And so you were talking about, like, you need to know what kind of birth control you're on. You're on the progestin or the estrogen plus progestin. How does one know what they're on? Because honestly, while you were saying that, I was like, I am the host of Femtech Focus Podcast, and I don't know which one I'm on.
I know. It's so common. I get that all the time. I mean, I didn't know that you didn't know which one you're on, but that's so common, is what I'm describing. These are, new vocabulary words for so many people. And so, typically the combination pills will have the placebo week. So it'll be 21 active tablets and a placebo week. And the number of people using progestin only is a much smaller group. Typically, people go on that prescription, for example, if they're breastfeeding, to not pass estrogen to the baby, if they have a history of migraine. So usually, a physician will kind of emphasize if that's the one that you're on, because it is so sensitive, and it's much more common to be on the combination. But I think what you said just speaks to the gap. You don't necessarily need to become the expert in what formula is in your prescription, but because of that, it would be really nice to have an app like Emmy that actually just tells you, like, okay, this is the prescription you're on, so therefore this is what you need to do, because whether or not you think you took it on time, we have proof that you didn't. And so that was one of the founding principles, is it's not actually that people need to become so much more obsessive and anxious about the pill and learning everything. We could be that partner and that coach and alleviate some of the stress, because you have so many better things to think about and worry about than what time did you take the pill 2 days ago, for example.
Yes. All right. Some other questions I came up with. One was, does your app provide some information where you can actually say, hey, I'm on this antibiotic for the next 2 weeks or something? And like, because sometimes I go to the, pharmacy for medicine, and they're like, by the way, this interacts with your birth control. And I'm like, well, I'm single and lonely, so whatever. And I'm sick, like whatever, like it doesn't matter. But you're really making me think about this. So does your app provide that kind of info too?
It's in our roadmap. We don't specifically have those, that type of information yet about other prescriptions, but that really is the vision of the company, is what could we do to connect the dots between the physician and the pharmacy and the app and the case. And not only to tell people, oh, you're on this prescription, so your pill is going to be different, but also just help people find the right pill for them. So right now, we have so many different categories for symptom and side effect tracking, which we really see as something that's going to be helpful to figure out if you're on the right pill. If you have excruciating cramps every month on the pill, that's another topic and example where women have just been told, oh, that's just a part of life. Every month you're supposed to suffer at an excruciating level, maybe be unable to get out of bed, maybe go to the emergency room. Those are not exaggerated situations. As you know, these are common things that people experience. Yet so often, maybe if you just found a different medication, you could alleviate those symptoms. And so we want to help with both better inputs. Like if you track, we can tell you maybe to talk to your doctor about a different prescription, but then also if you are on multiple medications, how do you make sure that your overall care is optimized for you?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I've said it on this podcast before. Years ago, I was on a birth control that during my period week, my breasts would get huge, huge. I'm not talking like regular, like, oh, it's my period. I would be like
a whole nother set of bras for this week.
And it was so painful. Like, for them to grow that fast, that big, once a month like that. And I mean, admittedly, there was a piece of me that was like, hell yeah, look at hey, look at them. They look great, but like, that's not normal. Like, that's not normal. If men were on a pill that made their balls 3 times bigger for a week,
we would have
that would be addressed.
Dozens of solutions to this problem. There's a funny, I wish I could remember the company who did this. I'm sure you've maybe spoken to them before, but they did a funny video of if men breastfed and just a total like kind of fantasy world of how many products we would have and what the work office setup would look like, and it would be a point of pride. And
yeah, I
think it's always interesting to consider, like, okay, how gendered is this experience and why, and what can we do about that?
And it's not just like healthcare and innovators' fault, because I knew like this is crazy, like changing my physiology. And you know what? I accepted it. I was like, well, this is just the birth control I'm on. And so women are like, we're literally innovating for status quo. Like the status quo is that you're going to be uncomfortable as a woman, like that's
it really has been.
Yeah.
And I think so many people think, maybe this is just how it's supposed to be, or maybe I'm the only one. And not only is there that negative or misleading self-talk, but also physicians often tell women that they're overreacting. We know that there's a history of women going to the hospital with excruciating cramps, and it turns out that they have a diagnosis for something severe like endometriosis, yet it takes years because often the physicians are saying, oh, it's just cramps. I'm sure nothing is wrong. You need to go home. And so that's another opportunity that we see to empower women, is to be able to show, okay, your cramps are not average. You are logging cramps at a level that's top 5 percentile in terms of pain. And so do with that what you will, but we want you to know that this is not the average experience, even if people tell you it is. And we feel like if you can have this whole community of women kind of behind you to have that conversation with a physician, it could be much more empowering. Because we tell ourselves like, oh, I guess this is just average, normal, as good as it gets. Right.
Yep. I was talking to a founder the other day who wants to innovate medical school, like books and training and all the things, because she was working in the psych ward at a hospital, and she kept getting all these young teenage girls being sent to her. And she was like, what's the problem? And they were like, well, like, I want to kill myself because my period and my cramps are so bad. And she's like, you're not suicidal. You have endometriosis, or you have PCOS. Why did they send you here? Like, you're just trying to describe how bad your pain is. You don't actually need to be in the psych ward. You need to be, like, she's like, it was crazy. Like, medical doctors at a great hospital were just like, you must be nuts,
totally.
Girl, right? Crazy.
I think I'm happy to hear that people are working on this, because there is obviously such a gap, I think, in med school training, in textbooks, evidenced by the fact that people are so often referred to the wrong place. And it's not as if endometriosis is niche, right? Doesn't this affect,
I think it's like
10% of women, and same with polycystic ovarian syndrome. And so it's heartbreaking, right? To think of those teenage girls, like, this is, again, it's their first experience with the healthcare industry, and just to be sent the wrong direction or told just to get used to it, I think is really unacceptable.
Another question. So I was, I have always respected, like, the burden on women is that we have to remember to take our pill every day or at the same time for it to work and all those things. Yeah. And then somebody brought up, like, and we have the burden of, like, getting our prescription refilled and, like, going to the pharmacy before they close. And I was like, damn, you're right. Like, I have just accepted that burden. You're right, though. Like, add that to the list. Add it to the list, right? Of things that
absolutely
that men don't have on their plate, right?
Yes.
And so, because if I don't go to the pharmacy, and currently I'm on an insurance that only lets me get 1 month at a time. So
you have to go exactly on that. If you go early, they're going to reject it. If you go late, you're risking unplanned pregnancy.
That's right.
There are shocking obstacles to getting medication when it's birth control.
I wanted to ask you about Emmy. Like, is there any, like, reminder about going to get your pill refilled and stuff like that? Tell me about that part.
Yeah, so within our app, you can really build out your custom pill pack. So I have 21 active pills. I skip the placebo week, so I want to start every 21 days. And with that information, we do send reminders a couple of days before the new pack starts. And then the day that you're supposed to start the new pack, your new pack is coming up. Today's the day to start your new pack, because it's not just one problem. It's not just remembering that pill every single day. It is also what you described, remembering to get the prescription, remembering to start the new pack. A lot of people don't take their placebo pills, which makes it kind of hard to remember when you're on day 7. And so we've tried to account for all those little subtle things that can throw you off. Even it's less relevant right now because I know people aren't traveling as much, but when you change time zones, you're supposed to change the time that you take the pill.
Never thought about
just
that.
To be kind of in line with what time you would have taken it in your local time zone. And most people don't think about that, or they add 2 hours instead of subtracting. And so our app just offers automatic time zone adjustments. So we say, hey, we see that you're in a new time zone. We're going to remind you at this time instead. And it's important. I've spoken with a woman who got pregnant when she was traveling abroad and just, missed a few days, did the math wrong. So it's like every little thing. And when people ask, well, what about a phone alarm? Like, isn't that, good enough? Isn't that solving all the problems? It doesn't even know how to solve the problems I just described, right? It's like, what? And actually that would be cool if phone alarms like switched time zones and reminded you to go to the pharmacy and stuff. But I haven't seen that. So that's why we felt like we needed to build it ourselves.
And even going to the pharmacy before I go on a trip, so I'll have to beg them. Well, if my insurance won't cover a month, I'm leaving tomorrow for a week. You won't give it to me till next week. Or like going to a pharmacy in another city, another state, another country. It's insane. It's truly insane how it all
there
works.
are a lot of obstacles to be overcome for sure.
What are, where are you at currently with the company? Like, can people get the pack, get the app? Like, how can they do that? How many women are you helping right now? And then what's your future goals for the company?
Yeah, so we are commercially available. We launched on Emmy.com, which is our website, back in 2020, so a couple of months ago, and we're available on iOS as well as on Android. So almost anybody on the pill can use our product. The app is also free to download and use, and so that's a great way to just start to test it and get used to it. And what we find is a lot of people start using our app. They love the experience, but they want those automatic updates from the case. And so that's why so many people are using both. And the case itself works with more than 100 brands of birth control pills. And so it's really easy to set up. You literally turn on Bluetooth, click the pairing button, and it's connected and synced.
And it's so cute.
Thank you. I mentioned, I designed heart valves. I designed hearing aids. When I was looking at women's health, I was thinking about how, the pill is a product that you use every single day. I want this to be something that doesn't look like, blood pressure monitor or something that you're just going to put on the shelf. I want it to be beautiful. And so we teamed up with a design team named Deerfield. And this is a prominent agency who has really incredible experience with fashion, beauty, and we worked with them to say, like, how could we make this pill experience fashionable, beautiful, Instagram worthy, purse worthy, something that you're proud of. And that has really resonated with our customers. People say they love it for different reasons. Some people love to show it off. Some people actually like that their mom doesn't know it's birth control and it's subtle. It looks like makeup. And so that was an interesting design challenge to think of, okay, how do you make something that's both subtle if you want it to be and something that you want to show off if you feel that way about it too.
Yeah. Cause I've definitely slept over a guy's house or whatever, like brought my little morning kit and like, I have my birth control just right. And you know exactly what it is. Like half of the pills are gone, half of
exactly.
Like whatever, they should know I'm like doing that. We should have already talked about it. But there's also like a piece of me that I'm like, I don't want him to look at this. Like, I don't want him to like check up on my birth control, did I take it today or not? Cause it has like the days of the week on the top. So it's like, there's also a part where I'm like, how do I not have this, just be so obvious sitting here next to my toothbrush, right?
Yeah, it's a personal thing. I remember I used to miss pills because I would try to take it at lunchtime at work. But the schedule always shifts. And I mentioned I was the only woman on an engineering team. And I was like, this just feels like a lot to share, to have all of my colleagues see that I'm taking a pill. And so it wasn't even that I was ashamed of being on the pill, and I'm the first person who will like walk proudly with a tampon across like a public place. Like, I'm like, forget about hiding it under your sleeve. Like, this is a normal, we're not hiding toilet paper. This is so normal. But that did resonate with me. Like, just because you're not ashamed doesn't mean you don't want a little bit of privacy, and you deserve that. And so, we really invested in making that feel like something that you could have with our product if you wanted it.
Cool. So it's available now. And what are your goals for the future of Emmy?
Yeah, so we are rapidly expanding. We really listen to our users and requests that we get. And what we're finding is the most common is, how can Emmy support even more parts of the healthcare journey? We recently received a grant and are exploring partnership with Express Scripts, which is a big, prescription management provider. And so that's kind of a hint of where we're going, as we're thinking about, okay, how else can we make it easier to get access to the pill and get the pill to your door and things like that. But then from there, what's been really cool is people trust Emmy so much with their day-to-day health experience. So many people track their sexual activity, track their symptoms, their side effects, their cycle. And it just makes it obvious where there are other gaps. I mean, there's so many gaps within women's health, but we're able to see, okay, what are those gaps that are the most common, most important to our customers that we could solve with other products, with other app features. And so that's really cool.
It's probably for the first time actually quantified, right?
It's quantified, exactly.
We know this is an issue, but no one actually quantified it, right?
Yes, for sure. For sure.
I love that you got a grant, because I do a lot of fundraise consulting, and I just I can tell you about pitch decks and angels and VCs and all the things, but there's a huge piece of me that I'm like, get those grants.
Yeah.
Like, don't give away equity, get grants. There is some crazy number, like $2 billion a year goes unaccounted, like unissued from the government because no one applied for the grant. Right? Like, it's crazy. And a lot of what we're doing in Femtech, unfortunately, is R&D. No one has looked into it. And so as an investor myself in Femtech, I don't mind investing in you in order for you to do the research, but I really rather you ask the government to fund that part. I want to fund the marketing and the scaling.
Yep.
So what agency if you can say, like, what agency you got the grant from, and what is your experience around the grant part?
Yeah, well, so we've raised more than $250,000 of grant funding over the course of the life of the company, starting with small grants. When I graduated from the Stanford Biodesign Fellowship, there were these opportunities for 25K grants, 50K grants. And they've come from kind of an interesting array of sources. One came from a nonprofit called VentureWell, which I think is a great place for aspiring innovators to look, because they really seed early ideas. And then this larger one is from Express Scripts that I mentioned, through a program called Adapt through the Rosenman Institute, which we're a company, portfolio company of. And so I think there are even more opportunities, those larger government grants where companies work with agencies to get that. So far, we found we're the experts at telling our own story and really knowing what do we need and how would we use those funds. I mean, I know where we put every single dollar of the business and how we're going to put it to use. And so those have all been internal efforts. And I've raised all three types of money. I've raised grant funding, I've raised angel funding, I've raised venture funding. And I agree with you. Grant funding is so helpful and instrumental. For us, it was really, especially early on, to prove the concept, to do our early testing. If people thought an alarm was good enough, they certainly were going to want to see some data to show that they should invest in what we were building. And so that has been really helpful.
Yeah, because I'm convinced women's health is important, but we actually do need those graphs to convince people who think women are niche, right? We need the graph and the data to show. One last question on the grants part.
Yeah.
What would you suggest to our listeners who are like, wow, that sounds great. Where do I go? Like, what do I Google? Because even for myself, Femtech Focus is structured as a nonprofit. And I Googled women's health foundations. Man, there's hundreds. I was like, I need another intern to handle this. That's too much. So what do you suggest if we have a, aspiring founder, early stage founder saying, how do I find these grants? What do they Google? What do they do?
Yeah, well, I mean, I will agree with you. It's true that you have to just filter through hundreds of opportunities. Some of the bigger, more concentrated places to look include NSF, National Science Foundation, NIH, National Institute for Health grants. And some of those websites actually link to so many other opportunities. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation often seeds women's health opportunities more so globally. So I think it depends on the type of company that's being built. We found many of our early grants through different listings and email listservs at Stanford itself. And so I think that's something I'm subscribed to so many different, email listservs just to stay in the loop on that. But I think that has been interesting. There's some, university related grants and then some of the broader government funded national grants.
Cool. Well, maybe, for our listeners, we do have a virtual network with almost 500 members now. And so maybe it's a crowdsourcing thing too, right? If you are subscribed to something and you see a grant for contraception, but you work on endometriosis, maybe you throw that in our virtual network platform, right? So somebody else can find it too. So
absolutely. And that is how I learned about some of those lesser known grant opportunities, is through networking with other founders. And
collaboration.
That's such a good example of, why not help? If you see a grant that could help another company that it's not even relevant for you, I try to share that as much as I can, because, there's karma. Then people reach out to you and it is such a community.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I have two last questions for you. Then we'll wrap it up.
Okay, sounds good.
These last two are some of our listeners' favorites. The first one is, if someone wanted to start a femtech company, what's an area in women's health and wellness that still needs innovating?
Well, we've talked about one of them already, which I guess it's two, PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and endometriosis are two conditions where it's just so staggering to me how common these are. It's 10% of the population. And yet there are gaps at every step of the way, gaps in identifying, gaps in treatment, gaps in really just understanding both clinically and from the patient perspective. And I come across this a lot because a lot of people use the pill to try to address this. So there's a lot of crossover there, but the pill doesn't solve every problem for those conditions. And so I would love to see more innovators trying to innovate in that area, because not only is the area underfunded and under innovated in, but there's just so many ways that I think you could make a difference.
Yeah.
And then the one that we haven't talked about as much is in menopause. And we are finally starting to see a few companies popping up in this space, but menopause is a universal condition that essentially every woman goes through. And it's such a mystery, and it's a mystery for years, and everyone needs their own unique treatment regimen to get through the symptoms. And so, and it's relevant. We're thinking about it too, because a lot of people actually do go back on hormonal therapy to address those symptoms. But again, that's not the only solution. So I think that's an area where I would love to see more companies.
Absolutely. I was talking to a corporate lawyer the other day, and she said she was on the phone with some private equity PE guys, and she mentioned menopause, and she mentioned, women over 40, and they said, "You mean geriatrics?"
Oh my gosh.
And she was like, Brittany, like, I can't with these guys. And I was like,
yes,
we have so much work to do.
Geriatrics.
Simply because we're like no longer having babies, we are not geriatric. Okay. That's not the point of our existence. Crazy. Our last question is, what do you think the femtech industry as a whole needs the most right now in order to be successful?
Well, I do think at the highest level, the femtech industry does need more funding. Dollars drive businesses and business opportunity, and every femtech founder has found so many ways to be scrappy, but at the end of the day, it's a huge business opportunity that is so worth investing in. And so I think it needs that funding. I think to unlock that funding, what we need to see more is people believing women, which is something that we need to see beyond femtech. But I've been kind of staggered during some of my investor meetings the boldness of people who know nothing about the pill, who tell me what it's really like, who tell me, what the real problems for women are and why the pill is perfect, and just all of these things where I'm perplexed. I'm like, I don't know why you wouldn't believe this data that I'm sharing with you of hundreds of women.
Someone mansplaining your own vagina to you. Who doesn't have a vagina? Yes.
Exactly. And maybe somebody doesn't believe it at first, and then they ask one woman, and if she didn't struggle with the pill, then that must prove all women don't. And so it's kind of basic, but I'd love to see investors and partners approach Femtech the way they approach every other category. Like, oh, I'm kind of new to this. I need to do some research. Let me learn from you. And I think that would go a long way in terms of driving innovation in the industry.
Do you think they don't, and this is a hypothesis because I don't have a graph, I don't have the data on it, but I have a hypothesis that a lot of investments are made because the pitch is heard, and then the men go out for beers, or they go to the football game in the clubhouse, or they go golfing, and they're like, hey, so just heard of this new company called Emmy, and it's a birth control pill, and I don't know. I feel like the barrier there is that like men are not encouraged to talk about periods.
Mm-hmm.
Men don't know the difference between vagina and vulva. Men don't talk about nipple discharge, right? Like it's encouraged for them to talk about SpaceX and rockets and finance,
Yes.
and blockchain and crypto and like things that are more quote unquote masculine and not about the women's biology. And I think that that's a huge barrier to our deals getting funded. Mm-hmm. Even if we can convince them in the pitch originally, I find that a lot of investors like to talk to their friends, get another, like, am I crazy? Like, is this good? But those conversations don't happen because they have to say the word like, Awkward Essentials, killing it right now, Femtech company, killing it. But they have a sponge to soak up cum from your vagina after sex.
Yep.
I do not anticipate men talking about that.
Hey, on the golf course,
the bathroom too. Like, hey, like, So,
I think you're right, and I think that's where it shouldn't have to be our problem to solve. But I do think any work that we could do towards really shaking the stigma and shaking the taboo, and I mentioned just the example of like not hiding your tampon when you are walking to the bathroom, not telling someone you have a migraine and you're staying home from work if really the truth is that you're on your period. And just we've been conditioned that we shouldn't talk about it. And so then I think you're right, in business meetings, casual or not, we've all socially been conditioned like, oh, that's just not something that you bring up. I don't know even the vocabulary for that. And so trying to normalize it, those are, smaller day-to-day shifts that I hope can add up to a much bigger impact.
That is I love this show because you guys always remind me of all these other things that I've done in my own woman life. Like in grad school, I can remember I had a really bad yeast infection and couldn't go to school for 3 days. And I had to make up like I have the flu.
Right.
Because I was like, oh, I can't tell my female boss that I have a yeast infection. Like, what would she think of me?
Yeah, even between women, right? Yeah. That we just feel like there's this reason to hide it. And if you think of commercials, even for pads and tampons, there's that stereotype like blue, what is it? Dishwasher detergent, they're putting some blue liquid on it. And it's like, why? That's so crazy. People clearly don't have a problem with blood. You've never seen in a TV show if someone like has a cut on their arm, blue blood coming out, and like it's just this weird messaging. Like this should be, can you imagine? But it's like, let's question that. Let's not act like we have to dance around it. And the more you can make it part of the culture, that's at least one obstacle that you can overcome. And I think it impacts everything from not only innovation to policy. Like this culture where you feel like you can't talk about women's health makes it so people don't talk about it. And so we have to shake that up.
Well, I am so excited. We are getting a woman as our vice president,
Me
the
too.
First time we're getting a uterus up in there, a clitoris up in there, like
it's incredible.
Breastfed up in there because it's like, if you don't have it, you're not going to think about it, you know? And so I'm really excited to potentially see some initiatives from her. Kamala actually led a recent bill in the Senate before she was running for fibroid research.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I'm like, we could have more funding, you know, I just got to get Kamala's cell phone number and text her.
I know. Maybe you can get her as a guest on the show. Wouldn't that be amazing?
On the show. Oh man, this has been so much fun. Obviously, we're gonna be friends. I can already tell. We've gone way over time, but I don't care. This is so worth it. Thank you so much for your time today. And I think you have a special promo code for our listeners.
Yeah, we'd love to share a promo code with the listeners. So with code Femtech15, you can get 15% off. And I mentioned our website is Emmy.com. So you can just enter that directly at checkout. And then you can also find us on Instagram at Meet Emmy and on Facebook at try.emmy.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. This was great.